Welcome back to 101 East, where we are discussing the role of Indonesia's anti-terror police force. One of BRIMOB's branches is GEGANA, a special operations unit whose duties include counter-terrorism, search and rescue and bomb disposal. It also has a tarnished human rights record. So what sort of person works for GEGANA? We've spoken to one anti-terror policeman from the brigade. Here's his story.
Nama saya Gana Jaya.
My name is Gana Jaya. I'm 40 years old. I work as a policeman with BRIMOB, specifically with a special operations unit, GEGANA. I joined BRIMOB because it's always been my ambition to work for them. When I was much younger, I wanted to join the military, but after I entered the academy, I became qualified to join the police. And within the police force, there was BRIMOB, so I chose to join the BRIMOB unit. The job of a policeman is very honorable because we provide protection and we serve the community. We are always deployed to troubled areas to deal with conflict between rival groups. We go to places like Aceh, Poso, Ambon and Papua. But to be honest, the most satisfying aspect of my job is fighting terrorism. It's not because I enjoy fighting the terrorists, but because we are able to stop terrorist activities. Terrorists are people who are angry, or they're suffering from poverty, or have ideologies that are not shared by the rest of the nation. They feel the need to take up arms to further their cause. Regardless of their motive, we fight them because we are sworn to fight crime. My team, as part of GEGANA, never feels fear when fighting terrorists. We are not afraid because every day we take part in exercises that prepare us to face such dangerous situations, whether on a national or international scale. As a member of BRIMOB, which is part of the National Police, I'm aware of the past abuses our unit has been linked to. We are trying to improve ourselves. The leadership is also trying to implement a program and a culture of policing ourselves so we can move ahead. The police unit of the past is very different from the present brigade.
And in the studio today, ALLAN, NAIRN, Robert LOWRY and NOOR HUDA ISMAIL. Let's get into the issue we were mentioning just before the break, and that is the human rights side of the affair. Now, how bad do you think that the accusations are?
I think it's very bad if you look at all the numbers of the victims of this human right by this police section.
But I mean, you've already said that a lot of this is down to the absence of civil institutions within Indonesia. So how do you propose it's solved?
I think we need to have a more democratic atmosphere where we can actually have a civil society that actually can control, can open up a discussion. Like you already mentioned that most of the top leaders who actually involved in this human rights atrocity are still free, and most of the effort to curb the problem on human rights mainly on the target at the lower levels. So
Alan,
that's what we need.
To what extent should we hold the funders of these organizations responsible, and to a large extent Western governments? We've seen this pattern before where Western governments take a short-term approach to fighting a certain threat in a certain place, and the long-term consequences are not addressed. Are the Western governments turning a blind eye to these abuses?
I think you can use President Bush's standard. He says, if you aid a terrorist, you are a terrorist. The U.S. has aided the TNI Polri, the Indonesian Armed Forces and Police, as they've carried out massive terrorist killings. So therefore the U.S. officials who've done that, as well as the Australian officials, the European officials, they have to be held accountable as well. If we enforce the murder laws, if we had a civilized world order, these people would be facing trials for crimes against humanity, Indonesians and Americans and other Westerners as well.
A lot of people argue that right now we are reaping the whirlwind of exactly the same practice that happened in Pakistan. All the arms that were pumped into Pakistan 20 years ago are coming back to haunt us. Is this going to happen in Indonesia?
No, because the external governments are actually trying to improve the quality of the performance of the Indonesian police in this particular aspect. But we should emphasise...
That is the top line, but the bottom line, the actual effect, is human rights abuse.
But they were always going on anyway under the authoritarian regimes of the Suharto era. And as I said before, you can't change these things suddenly. And you have to ask yourself, what is the priority of the Indonesian government in terms of the transition? And if we look at the presidency, for example, the priority is obviously economic growth. because without economic growth, he doesn't have the taxes to pay the public service, the police and the military, to the point where they don't have to be involved in criminal activity.
Again, practical considerations and all correct, but Alan, address the point.
But you see, foreign training actually makes matters worse, because if you have a bad force, a force with a bad mission, if you make them more technically proficient, they're even more dangerous. They kill people more effectively. If you have a criminal, it's better if he's bumbling. You don't want him to be good at his job. There are basically two roads to a solution, as you asked before. One, the main action obviously has to come from the Indonesians themselves, who rise for justice, and thousands have died trying to do that. And the second aspect is that the foreign accomplices, facilitators of these crimes in the US and Europe and Australia, they have to cut them off and themselves be brought to justice.
Is there, within Indonesia, is there any message being received by the people who are selling arms, the soft loans that are coming from Britain and the United States? Is there any message attached to those saying, look, we are concerned about the potential for the downside here, or do they just...
Yeah, this is always the problem with this, to see this problem. There's a double standard of, I said to you, the double standard of the West.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give you the money and all the infrastructure as long as you fight our enemy, but I don't care with your human right inside your country. So this is the problem. You have to address this issue together.
Is there a double standard
in the long term?
No, I don't believe that there is. Most of this problem affects Indonesia just as much as it affects the rest of the world. For example, Indonesia can't have economic growth if it's got terrorism units active in its own country. It won't attract the foreign investment it needs to do the reforms it needs to do.
But should these arms shipments not come with some kind of moral attachment?
Well,
some suggestion?
they actually do. From 7 or 8 years ago, the International Committee of the Red Cross has had teams in there teaching international human rights law, etc. The problem is that there isn't the infrastructure within the country to enforce the laws that actually exist. And that's the issue we face at the moment. And that's why I say we've got to go back to why that is the case. Why isn't the government pressing ahead with reforms in the security sector? And
well, let me put that to you, NOOR.
Okay.
Why isn't the government pressing ahead with reforms in the security sector?
Because, of course, the rampant corruption inside the justice systems, you know. Because once the police who has such a high position, they will have access to the law. So this is the problems.
But the fundamental point is that while these jihadist terrorists are despicable, they're criminals, they kill hundreds. The TNI and POLRI, the Indonesian security forces, they've killed hundreds of thousands. And another aspect that's very important, apart from the mass slaughters in places like Timor, Aceh, Papua, the Moluccas, there's also the daily life of the poor. For many poor communities in Indonesia, it's like living in occupied territory with the police and the preman, the police and military-linked thugs. They sell drugs, they do extortion rackets, there's no law. If someone robs your house, you can't go to the police. The police will demand bribe money from you. The police are hired by rich people to tear down poor neighborhoods, to evict poor women from their markets so new developments can be put up. People are living without basic law and order.
And it's the police
who are their daily oppressors, completely apart from larger politics.
Well, let's finish off with this issue then. The reform is the duty of the government, and the Western governments and outsiders have no responsibilities here.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think so. I mean, like, there is no such a strong commitment from Indonesian government to look at this security reform as such a top priority. For instance, let's say, let us use terrorism as one of the issues. If you look at all the priority of the president candidate, all the politicians, they don't mention even terrorism as part of their, you know, of their programs, you know, the part of top list of their priority. Again, economics and economics.
Okay, well, that being the case then, presumably we can just look forward to continued human rights abuses and a continued culture of immunity.
So long as the West keeps backing them. The Clinton White House said of Suharto, he's our kind of guy. And Suharto was gone, but recently Bush and Condoleezza Rice overrode the U.S. Congress and are starting to restore military aid to the Indonesian military. It's putting the lives of brave Indonesians who try to speak up for justice, who try to speak up for the poor, it's putting them on the line.
it is a mistake to see the Indonesian government as puppets of the United States, though. You have to say that. I mean,
they're not puppets, they're partners.
Well,
and they're being sponsored by the U.S.
But they bear the major responsibility for the actions that occur in their country, and they would be the last to claim that they're directed by foreign governments, and quite rightly
Oh no,
so,
they're
I
not
think.
directed, but the one who pulls the trigger is guilty, as is the one who supplies the gun and the training.
Okay. Now we will have to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining me today. That's all we have time for on this edition of 101 East. Until next time, goodbye.